So the first part is basically a business overview of GoMT, and it's a pretty extensive section simply because we have way too many business lines. We kind of position ourselves as a travel super app, and the way I've structured this particular section is in the form of, again, a quiz and a poll, right? So you will see a bunch of questions coming up on your screens, and then you have to answer those. I hope you were able to go through the pre-reads. If not, nothing to worry, but we'll go through the process. Like we'll look at, good thing is we are a listed company, right? So pretty much all the financials, all the numbers are out there for everyone to see, right? So we'll go through some of the earnings report, look at some of the numbers. We'll derive the numbers from there only. You don't even have to go around asking people for what our key numbers are, right? And then at the end of it, if you have any questions about some of the other sort of more deeper, if you want a more deeper dive, you want to understand some of the metrics a little better, happy to sort of help you do that, right? So yeah, so let's see how well prepared you all are. Hopefully you got all the pre-reads right. I had sent across a few earnings reports to the team to share those with you. Let's see if you know some of the numbers that I'm going to throw at you. Cool. So we'll again do a poll, and yeah, so the first set of questions will come up now for you guys to answer. Let's see.
We have 3 responses in.
Guys, don't worry, negative marking nahi hai. This is not CAT exam. Kuch bhi bhar do. If you don't know, I'm happy to address that. The way, like I said, the quiz is structured is it will give you a good overview of what all the key numbers for the organization is, and it will give you a very good sense of what our business looks like. Yeah, but please take your time. There is no rush. Like, we have enough time.
Two more responses. Anyone's filling it? Great. I'll just share the results now. Okay, it's on your screen.
Nice. मतलब पढ़ाई नहीं करी है लोगों ने, clearly दिख रहा है मुझे, but that's good. Which means that I have a lot more to talk about. So okay, so first we saw 23%, 70% said we did 1.5 billion of, we do typically do 1.5 billion GMV. Okay, fine. So the most popular choice is 1.5 billion. In the second question, the most popular choice is $800 million. Okay, fine. Gross margin percentage, highest voted answer is 11%. Okay, interesting. And finally, highest voted answer for flights gross margin is 7 to 9%. Awesome. Cool. Got it. So let's discuss these set of questions first before we do the next set of questions. So let's see. So we'll just switch between. So the first question was, what is the typical GMV we do in a year, right? And most of you answered, I think, 1.5 or 1.6, right? Which was the first choice, right? So let's look at what we did. I have a few earnings report that you guys also saw it, right? So, 21, FY22 is currently on, right? So what can you see here? Can someone read it for me? What is our gross bookings number? Let me just zoom it out. So this is our last year fiscal report, right? So obviously in the fourth quarter, we publish the full year results because that is when the year ends. right? Our GMV, how do we call out our GMV? Our GMV is basically the number of gross bookings we do, right? So let's say we sell an air ticket worth 10,000 rupees. So all of that basically counts towards gross bookings or our GMV. So what does our GMV look like for the year 2021? Can anyone speak it out for me? From this, like I've already like the earnings report is in front of you.
$1.6 billion.
$1.6 billion. Great, right? So FY21 was $1.6 billion, but you also know, which is this number, 1635.4 million, right? So $1.6 billion. But you also know that again, last year was heavily hit due to COVID, right? So obviously, this is not what the typical sort of GMV number we do. The year in which was like pretty less impacted by COVID was basically FY19. FY20 obviously was heavily impacted, right? So we'll look at some of the older numbers. FY20 was also not too impacted by COVID because it kind of came at the very end. So FY19, what is the gross booking number here? This is 2019. So 18-19 fiscal year. What was the gross booking number? What is the gross booking number here? It is $5.4 billion. What did we do in FY20? FY20, even though the last few months were impacted a little bit because of COVID, because COVID had started kicking in sometime in March, March sort of time frame. Our fiscal runs from April to March. So FY20 fiscal is basically April 19 to March 20. So March 20, there was some impact because of COVID, but that is the year where we kind of did our highest GMV, which is $6.1 billion. So the answer to the first question was we did, like, actually there's not a typical GMV because every year we are also growing, right? So you could see that in FY19 we did 5.4 billion. In FY20 we did 6.1 billion. So 6.1 billion was the GMV that we did in FY20. Obviously after that it's been significantly impacted due to COVID. This year, last year we did $1.6 billion. So the right answer is $6.1 billion and not 1.6. 1.6 is way too low a number. And the reason, right? So if you had to basically contextualize this number, how would you think about it, right? Is $6.1 billion is a big number, small number? How do you think about it? Right? If I had to sort of ask you that in terms of GMV, how big MakeMyTrip is, like, how would you think about this question, right? You have to obviously baseline it with some number, right? Do you know what is Flipkart's GMV for 1 year? Annually, how much GMV does Flipkart do? Any idea? Anyone? You can Google it and tell me.
It's around 23 billion.
So I think Flipkart does about $20+ billion the last time I looked, right? So you can see that even though we are only a travel first marketplace, we are not a horizontal e-commerce marketplace, we still do significant GMV. We are pretty big. We are doing pretty much like almost 25% of Flipkart's GMV, right? So that itself tells you that how big and how dominant we are in travel space in India, right? So that's the first question. The second question was obviously what was the impact of COVID, right? So that you have already seen. Because of COVID, obviously our revenue, our GMV actually came down significantly. So we could only do $1.6 billion. So that was the second question. The third question was what is our gross margin percentage for the entire group, right? Across all lines of businesses. So I think most of you, if I remember correctly, what was the answer? Most of you said
1.5.
So yeah. So 46% of you marked 11%. How did you arrive at that number? Can someone sort of walk me through the logic? Like how did you get the 11% number?
So I just thought, what will be the commissions you would be gaining for a ticket or a hotel booking?
Yeah,
So
correct. Absolutely.
I thought maybe.
So, but how did you guys arrive at the 11% number? Like where did you get it from the earnings report?
Like it's I remember it's like 25% around, like for hotels, and it is around 7% for flights, and another section is also 20%. So if you do an average, I would say it's around 15%, something.
Got it. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So let me do some mathematics for you, right, from the earnings report, right? And it's pretty straightforward, right? There's like, I hope like you guys understand how to read the earnings report, right? So you see your GMV was $1.6 billion, right? And your revenue was $163 million, right? So what is your gross margin percentage? Because revenue is your top line, right? So if you sold tickets worth $1.6 billion, so you sold roughly around 1630 million, and you made 163 million as your top line revenue, your gross margin percentage is effectively 10%, right? This helps, right? So this is how you read the earnings report, right? So 1635.4 million, so 163 million divided by 1630 million, right, which is about 10%. So 10% is roughly your gross margin. And the reason why I arrived at the 11% number is because there is a small trick here, right? The way we look at IFRS revenue, and I hope you understand what IFRS is, it's the International Financial Reporting Standards, right? So the way we report our IFRS revenue is basically we make certain revenue, and from that we basically subtract all the discounting and cashbacks that we have given to the customer, right? So that is how we report our IFRS revenue, which gives me a 10% number, right? 163 divided by 1635. But actually, if you look at it, we report another interesting number called adjusted margin. And adjusted margin is basically effectively our take rate. Take rate is basically if I sell a ticket worth 10,000 rupees, how much money I make it without netting it for cashbacks and discounts, right? So if you look at it, our adjusted margin for air ticketing was $38 million, but in terms of revenue, we reported only $24 million, which means $14 million were passed on to customers as cashbacks and discounts from our own pocket. So our actual margin, if we had to derive the actual margin, we should do it basis adjusted margin and not from revenue number. Revenue number basically does not tell you that how much cashback discount we chose to pass on to the customer. That is not truly my gross margin. The gross margin is effectively how much commission, how much money I'm getting from my supplier, be it from my hotelier or be it from my flight partner, etc. Right? So actually the maths needs to be done on adjusted margin. Is it clear? So if you do the maths on adjusted margin, so here is a table down below, right? So if you were to do the maths on adjusted margin, you have about $38.2 million from air ticketing. This is 2021, which is like December 2021. Sorry, but 3 months ended March 31, 2021. So $38.2 million. So let's start putting these numbers. So we made $38.2 million from air ticketing. We made $35.5 million from hotels and packages. I'm just putting down those numbers, 35.5 from hotels and packages. Then we had $10.9 million from bus. Sorry, this is wrong. And then $5.1 million from other business units, right? So 5.1 from other business units. If I add all of this up, I made some mistake. Correct. So this is fine. And so this is only for that quarter. And this is our gross booking number for that particular quarter, which is $759 million, right? So in final quarter, we did GMV of $759 million and we made adjusted margin of $89 million, right? So what does our gross margin look like? Roughly around 11.8%, 11 to 12%, right? So that's the range. That is the number that we are looking at. So our gross margin is actually based on our adjusted margin and not really in terms of the actual revenue numbers that we report to the street, right? Because while reporting to the street, we actually account for cashbacks and discounts, which we could have held, right? We could have kept with ourselves, just that we want to grow faster than the market. So we are obviously passing on those cashbacks and discounts to our customers, but our actual gross margin is close to 12%, 11.8%. Is this clear? Does this help?
Yeah, just wanted to ask, one thing, Anurag, that are cashbacks and discounts the only thing we look for adjusted margin, like, or is there any other section we do?
Yeah, so good question. So what happens is the way you look at the income statement for GoMT, right? What happens is obviously you are selling tickets, you are making some take rates, and from those take rates, what is happening is the way the financial reporting works today is you made $38 million in case of flights, but what happened is you passed on $14 million of discounts to the customers, so you reported street revenue of only $24 million. But that's truly not your gross margin, right? So you actually made $38 million, right? After that, obviously the other line items come in, right? So you have other costs that are coming in. But at a top line level, $38 million is your absolute top line. No expenses being like reduced from this. This basically you sold so much of flight and hotel bookings and bus bookings and train bookings and whatnot, and this is the actual absolute top line number that you need. Other expenses will then start coming later. The only problem is the way IFRS standards work, they make you report your top line by subtracting the cashbacks and discounts. Right, so that's the only thing. Rest everything starts coming into the rest of the income statement items, right? So which is why the top line number, the only thing that needs to be added back is basically the cashbacks and discounts, and which is why we report this adjusted margin number every quarter. Every quarter you will see, every earnings report you will see that we always report a adjusted margin number. We report a revenue number and then we report a adjusted margin number, and in fact in every earnings report you will also see what we call as a management discussion analysis, right? Every earnings report has an MDA, management discussion analysis. Every report has something called why we feel that adjusted, sorry, I'll have to look it up. Wait, let me see if what's the best way. So obviously this nice table that we already looked at. Everywhere you will see in the earnings report, we talk about this adjusted margin number, and somewhere we talk about there is a standard sort of text in every earnings report which talks about why adjusted margin is the right metric to look at. So it would be somewhere. It's a fairly long report, so obviously I don't remember exactly where it is. But every report has that. So let me just try and see. Anyways, I'll look it up and show it to you. But basically, every report has some standard text which talks about why adjusted margin is the right way of looking at our business. So, for example, here is that line, right? So, customer inducement cost added back to adjusted margin is intended to reflect the way we view our ongoing business. Under IFRS, these customer inducement costs are required to be recorded as a reduction of revenue, which is why we say that our actual revenue is $38 million. And only because of the way IFRS wants us to report it, we basically report it as a reduction of revenue. Again, see here also, for example, bus ticketing also, again, same line is there. Under IFRS, these customer inducement costs are required to be recorded as a reduction of revenue, which is why we look at it that way. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Cool. So yeah, so the last question is basically flights gross margin, right? So flights gross margin, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Again, look at flights adjusted margin. So again, going back to the first thing, flights adjusted margin, which is 38.2 million, right? And then obviously you have to look at the flights GMV, which is not here, but it was there somewhere. So let's look at so something similar we will do for air ticketing. So somewhere there is a flights GMV number, and then you obviously have the adjusted margin number. So the numerator becomes adjusted margin, which is $38 million, and your denominator will be GMV for flights, right? So you divide the adjusted margin number divided by the GMV for flights, and you get the adjusted margin number for air ticketing, which is somewhere in the range of 7 to 9%. So just to sort of give you a more sort of holistic picture of what it looks like, so we also published a very nice investor deck. So you don't have to derive these numbers every single time. while all these numbers are basically somewhere hidden in our earnings report, you can always look at the report, calculate those numbers. But we also have a very nice investor deck that we publish pretty much every 3 months, right? So here is how it looks like, right? So for example, in FY20, we did $249 million of air ticketing GMV, and our adjusted margin percentage was 7%, right? Similarly, we also have a quarterly view here. So you can see that $38.6 million is what we did. Like this is the number we looked at, right? And in quarter 2 FY22, our adjusted margin percentage was 8.6%, right? So it kind of ranges between 7 to 9%. Sometime obviously 10.7% in Q1 FY22, but typically it ranges between 7 to 9%. So 7 to 9% is the right sort of gross margin range for air ticketing. For hotels and packages, again, you can look at it. It is somewhere close to anything between 18 to 20%. So for hotels and packages, your adjusted margin number is basically 18 to 20%. Bus ticketing, again, 8.5%, close to 8.5%. And obviously others is basically ancillary revenue. So you're running ads, you're basically doing some other stuff. There's no cost of goods sold, right? So there's no take rate concept. This is money you are making. Whatever money you are making is effectively directly going to your bottom line. So there is no concept of adjusted margin in case of others, right? So these could be any kind of ancillary revenue. You might be doing some partnership with someone, right? So that guy might be passing on some revenue to us directly, right? We might be running ads on our platform, right? So all of those guys directly, whatever is the top line is also the bottom line. There is no, whatever is the top line is basically the revenue. Whatever is the GMV number is the revenue number also, right? So $4.4 million is effectively the net revenue number, because there is no sort of, you are not really selling anything, right? You are directly, whatever money you're making, it is directly coming to your income statement, right? So that is how it works. Okay. So far, so good. Understood what our margins are for each of our respective businesses. Is this clear now? Any questions, comments? Okay. I hope you guys are already not sleeping. I can't see you because I'm sharing my screen. So we can move on to the next set of questions. Ishani, if you can help with the next set of questions, I'll stop sharing.
Yes, I'll just launch the second. It's on your screen now. You will be able to see.
The first question you should be able to answer now, because I've already shown you the number.
We have 4 responses in. Only 3 more to go. Anyone is wrapping up. Great. I'll share the results. Thank you. Okay, it would be on your screen now.
My God, जनता पक्का सो रही है. Oh my God, I just showed you the numbers. पहले वाले के भी गलत आंसर. So very interesting. So the first question says, what is the gross margin percentage for hotels and packages? This is specifically hotels and packages, right? What did I show you just now? What is the gross margin percentage for hotels and packages? Like 23% of you have said the gross margin percentage for hotels and packages between 7 to 9%, which is obviously wrong. That is the gross margin percentage for flights, not hotels and packages. I'll obviously show you the deck again. About 31% said 10 to 15%. That is also wrong. Between 15 to 20% is the right answer, which is like 40% of the respondents, right? How many business units do we have? Interesting one. So we'll go through it. I think this one is a little complicated to answer. It can be one of the many answers depending on how the way you look at it. How much is air of our total business in revenue terms? Interesting. So 46% of you said it is only 24% of our business in revenue terms, which is pretty interesting. So most of you guys think that air actually gives us less business. It only gives 24% of our business. A lot of you guys think, 47% of you think that 54% of our revenue is coming from hotels and packages. So good. So I think I'm quite happy with the results of this poll. So let's discuss all of these. Right. So let's move back to the deck. So this is the deck I showed you just now, right? So what is the adjusted margin percentage for hotels and packages? Can someone read it out for me for Q2 FY22?
18 to 20.
18.4%, right? So the margin for hotels and packages business, the gross margin for hotels and packages business is close to 20%, 18 to 20%,
Yes.
right? And not 7%. The 7% number is actually the flights number, right? So this is the flights number, right?
7 to 9.
So between 7 to 9% is the air ticketing margin. Between 18 to 20% is the hotels and packages business margin. This is expected, right? Because air is a very commoditized kind of product, right? We are not doing any fancy stuff on air supply, right? The airlines give us the supply. We just basically sell it. We are not able to do any fancy stuff there, right? So whatever take rates we agree with the airlines, that is what we get. But in hotels and packages, we have a lot more room. Simply because they are not corporate structures, right? Yes, there are some chain hotels, right? But most of them are independent hotels, right? So we have a lot more negotiation power, lot more room to negotiate, right? And it is not as competitive as flights, right? So hotels are also able to price it very differently, and hence, because we are able to negotiate much more strongly with them, because we are a very strong entity in hotels and packages space, we actually aggregate most of the Indian hotels and packages supply, right? We are able to get far better commissions there than we would ever be able to get on air ticketing business. And which is why, and then obviously in bus also very similar to air ticketing margin. So you are playing between like 7 to 9% range. And which is why your overall gross margin percentage is going up to 11%, right? Because hotels and packages is able to like push this average number up from 7 to 9% range to an 11% range. And that is happening because hotels and packages have very good margin. Does that help? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So next question was, how many business units do we have, right? So this is a fairly controversial one. It's not an easy one to answer. I just wanted to put it out there just to give you a sense of how big we have become, right? In fact, from the last time I was around here, when I was working here, and then I obviously moved out and came back, we have launched so many new business units, so much so that not probably even people within the company don't know how many business units do we have. But we have this aspiration, or we have this vision. We want to become a travel super app, and we keep adding new and new business units. So I'll just give you a flavor of all the different business units. I have actually listed them down for you, right? So obviously we have flights that you are aware of. We have hotels that you are aware of. We have a big ground transport business unit now, which has trains, bus, and cabs, right? And so trains, bus, and cabs. Then obviously we have holidays, right? And then with holidays, because we offer international holidays and all, we also have visa, right? And actually we also have activities. So visa and activities kind of fall under the holidays umbrella. Then we have gift cards. Then we have a fintech arm. In fact, just today, a new sort of new news came out in the media where we are looking to sort of scale our fintech arm even more. So we have something called Trip Money, which is basically offering loan products, insurance products, credit products to travel customers. Then we have started making a foray into B2B space also, right? So early on, MakeMyTrip was only in consumer travel space. But there are a lot of incumbents in business travel space also. So think of the travel desk at your company, right? So that's like the B2B offering B2B offering from a lot of companies, right? So we were not there in B2B space for a long period of time, but now we have made a foray into B2B space. And within B2B, we actually have two sort of products. We have something called MyBiz, and we have something called Quest to Travel, which basically cater to different sizes of organizations. So MyBiz is basically something focused on smaller sort of, you can think of them as MSME companies, right? Which have like probably between like 15 to 50 employees or 100 employees, whereas Quest to Travel is more sort of is a B2B offering catering to the more sort of corporate kind of customers, right? So the Tatas and Godreges of the world, right? Then we have made a foray into Gulf space, and that is an independent business unit because obviously Gulf countries, right? So the Middle East countries, we are now offering travel products to the Middle East countries as well. And there's a separate business unit simply because there are a lot of nuances for the Middle East countries, right? So obviously language is one big nuance, right? So language is obviously something, the currency support, the payment modes, everything is slightly different from what we offer in India. So we have a separate business unit that caters to the Gulf countries. GCC stands for Gulf Cooperation Council. Then we have something called My Partner, which is basically a product catering to agents, right? So we offer a white label product to our agents to make travel bookings, right? So this is basically trying to capture the offline part of the travel market. So we offer a booking panel to agents sitting in, let's say, Indore, Jhansi, Hyderabad, Lucknow, right? Where they can use the MakeMyTrip panel to basically make travel bookings for their customers. And we basically get some kind of commission percentage from that. Activities we have already discussed, which basically rolls up under holidays. We are now focusing specifically on alternate accommodation, what we call as alternate accommodation, which is basically homestays and villas, because obviously because of COVID, a lot of travel sort of trends are changing, and a lot of customers are actually preferring now staying in homestays and villas. So homestays and villas or alternate accommodation is actually a separate business unit in itself right now. And we also have metro, even though most of the metros are not operating right now, but we do also offer metro ticketing for Hyderabad Metro, and we had plans to do Mumbai Metro as well, right? So how many of these are there? So you have 3, 3, 6 to 8, then you have 5 more, 13, and then 3, 16. And then if you split flights itself into domestic and international flights, and hotels also into domestic and international hotels, because they behave very differently, right? International hotel supply is very different from domestic hotel supply, right? Getting international hotels on board is very different from domestic hotels on board. So technically, if you split these two, you are adding 2 more business units more, right? So effectively, you have 18 business lines operating within MakeMyTrip alone. And this is probably only going to, I don't know, maybe expand in future, right? So for example, I have not split cabs also, so it's still a very sort of upcoming business line, but cabs itself might get split into airport cabs and intercity cabs and whatnot, right? So anything you're looking at, anything between like 16 to 18, 19 sort of business units at MakeMyTrip alone, right? And all of these obviously require product managers, which is why we go to campuses every year and hire the smartest of you, right? So that's the answer to the second question. So my answer would be anything between like 16 or 18 is probably the right answer. So most of you, I think, got this one also wrong, because I think obviously you didn't know a few of these business units, especially the B2B and the MyBiz ones. Any questions on this? Do you want more clarity on what each of these business lines are, or was I able to explain most of it?
Yeah, just one second. You just mentioned, can you just tell me about the Quest to Travel?
Yeah. So Quest to Travel is basically a Mumbai-based company that we acquired recently, right? So we probably acquired them maybe a year and a half back, right? Or maybe more, if I might be a little sort of wrong about the timelines. And so MyBiz is a homegrown offering. So we went, when MakeMyTrip went into B2B travel space, right? They identified that the small and medium enterprises is probably a wide space. Those are the companies that are not served. Those are the organizations that are not served well by players today in the B2B space, right? So when MakeMyTrip built out its own sort of B2B offering, they did MyBiz, right? But but at some point of time, they realized that maybe it helps to also sort of, if you want to basically get a bigger footprint in B2B space, it is probably better to also sort of look at inorganic growth, right? And they went out and basically acquired this company called Quest to Travel. So Quest to Travel is like any traditional sort of B2B travel company which offers like travel bookings, right? So obviously if you most of you have worked at organizations in the past, so obviously there's an internal travel desk, right, where you go, you can book, right? There are a lot of companies in that space. For example, Amex is a very large player in that space, right? So Quest to Travel is something similar. So you think of Quest to Travel as a as like similar to Amex, but obviously a much smaller player than Amex, right? And they offer like traditional sort of travel booking panels and obviously service support to large corporates, right? So some of, like I said, right, we have the likes of Tata, Godrej, etc. So we keep closing new and new customers and new accounts. So we have fair bit of large accounts when it comes to Quest to Travel, whereas my business is very focused on small and medium companies. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Just give me a second. I'm getting some pings. Yeah. Cool. So that was the second one. Third one, interestingly, a lot of you got it right. I was actually surprised. I was expecting most of you to actually go wrong on this one, but you are actually, no, what am I looking at? So you are saying 24% or 24% of you are saying, no, sorry, 46% of you said that 24% of our business in revenue terms comes from air. So you are actually correct. So yes, so air has become a much smaller percentage of our revenue. Though again, there is a small trick here. We'll talk about that. So let's go back to the deck that I showed you, or rather the earnings report. So you're correct, right? So if you look at this number, right? So we know that revenue was $79 million for 4Q21, right? So again, go back to the Excel. Let me just shift this. So $79 million was our total revenue, right? And air ticketing was 24 out of 79, right? So $24.2 million. So how much is 24 by 79? Roughly around 30%, right? Which is like, so obviously this number is changing from quarter to quarter. The number that I gave you was probably for a much longer time range. So you can see that this is definitely much smaller than, like, air is definitely not our dominant business unit, right? In terms of revenue, right? Out of $79 million, like it is very clear from our this quarter earnings report that we made only $24 million out of $79 million when it, in terms of revenue, right? And which is like close to 30%. So most of you are correct when you say that this is somewhere around 24-25%. This is actually true. In revenue terms, this is true. However, the same thing happens here as well. If you look at it from an adjusted margin perspective, right? So adjusted margin was $38 million in case of air ticketing, right? Whereas in terms of for hotels and packages, adjusted revenue. So here is what is happening, right? In case of air ticketing, your revenue reported to the street is $24 million, but obviously you did a lot of cashbacks and discounts, which is why your actual adjusted margin was $38 million. In hotels and packages, if you look at it, your actual adjusted margin after doing the cashbacks and discounting thing is only $35 million. So it is actually less than air, right? If for this specific quarter, there are some nuances in this specific quarter. So in revenue terms, because air ticketing is way more competitive as a market, right? There are a lot of players in the market. So we are forced to do a lot more cashback and discounting in air ticketing versus hotels and packages, right? So hotels and packages, what is happening is we are doing far less discounting because we are like by far the dominant player. There are not a whole lot of hotel ticketing players in India who are like really competing well with us, right? So the market landscape is much sort of saner out there. So in terms of actual revenue, because we are forced to do a lot of discounting, our actual air ticketing revenue shrinks a lot because we pass on a lot of cashbacks and discounts. So in terms of revenue percentage, we are like closer to like anything between 25 to 30%, right? But when you look at it from an adjusted margin perspective, right, which is like what would we have made if we were not forced to pass all these cashbacks and discounts, there again, air is probably as sizable as hotels and packages, right? Almost like a like pretty much the same split, right? So that is where it is, right? So from a revenue perspective, it will look less, but from an adjusted margin perspective, which is again a true representation of our business, air is still very, very sizable. So we'll go back to the deck, the master deck that we were looking at, right? So this is exactly what I'm saying, right? So $38 million from air ticketing in terms of adjusted margin, $35 million from hotels and packages, $7.9 million from bus ticketing, and $4.4 million from others, right? So if we just add these up, so let's just add these. So from a revenue perspective, you saw this number was only 30%, but if you add it from an adjusted margin perspective, so 38, 35, you have 7.9 and you have 4.4. 7.9 and 4.4. And if I add all of these up, right, and now I take air's percentage as a percentage of our adjusted margin, it is close to 45%, right? So air, so if we wanted to, we can make a lot of revenue in air, just that because air is so competitive, we are being forced to pass a lot of cashbacks and discounts to our customers, which is why from a revenue perspective, from an IFRS revenue perspective, we are making only 30% revenue, but it is as sizable as hotels and packages even today. Even though hotels and packages have grown significantly, but air is still very big and air still contributes a fair share of our revenues. And actually adjusted margin is the real view of our revenue split, right? So air is probably at the same, air is actually at pretty much still today at the same level as hotels and packages. Is that clear? Does that help?
Anurag had a query there.
Sure.
So in the IFRS report, it's that in the hotels, the adjusted margin is less than the revenue.
Yes.
How is it so?
I think what happened here, this is not true in all earnings report, but I think that's a great catch. I think what happened here is there must have been something, right? So what happens sometimes is because this is bundled, right? Hotels and packages actually means both our hotels business as well as our holidays business. Sometimes what happens is you are forced to do some kind of write downs, because in packaging what happens, you actually have to pre-buy a lot of inventory, right? And then you basically package it up, right? So you basically pre-buy a lot of inventory from flights, from air suppliers, from hotel suppliers, right? And sometimes you're forced to basically, so technically you made significant amount of revenue, but you took some write downs on whatever supply you had to pre-buy because you were not able to sell it, right? So which is why adjusted margin actually became less than revenue. So that's like unique for this particular quarterly earnings report. This is not, in general, this is not true. In general, your adjusted margin will always typically be higher than the revenue that you see in a particular quarter. But great question. Does that help?
Yeah, got it.
Got it. Okay, understood. So yeah, even I was surprised, right? So I did not notice this specific metric right now. Only now I noticed that for this particular quarter, the adjusted margin was actually less than revenue, but that typically does not happen. That's not typically the case. If you look at other earnings report, that will not happen. Cool. I think this has specifically to do with the fact that this again the COVID year, right? So COVID year, a lot of weird things have happened. So this is like one of them. Great question again. Great observation. Good. So what was the final thing that we wanted to discuss? Yeah. So you guys are correct. In fact, let me look at my sheet. If I do the same maths, and I think I must have done it for a longer time frame. Yeah. So actually, if I look at the hotels wala split, the hotels is actually close to, in terms of revenue, it is close to 60%. So I would have done it for a different year for a longer time frame. So about 24% was coming as air revenue and almost like 58-60% was coming as hotels revenue. But again, like I said, this is only from a revenue perspective. From an adjusted margin perspective, the hotels business is very similar to the air business even today. And at some point of time, it is obviously hotels business, because of the much superior margin structure, etc. And there is a lot more headroom in hotels, right? Because still far less people book hotels online compared to air. So this number will continue to grow. And at some point of time, hotels, it is already the biggest law, even in terms of adjusted margin. But it will, like, in near future, it will actually overtake air by a significant percentage, right? But like I said, revenue terms, it looks much more, the difference looks much more sizable, 58% versus 24%. But in actual adjusted margin terms, that difference is still very much matching. It's not like those numbers are still very close, right? So the answer to the fourth question was basically close to 60% in terms of revenue terms. But like I said, in terms of adjusted margin terms, it will be close to 50, like 45, 55. So that is how it will be. Cool. So we can do the next set of questions then. I think hopefully this part was clear so far. At any point of time you guys are getting bored, please let me know. I will maybe move on to the something more fun. So like, it's not like it's one way, but yeah.
Third quiz would be on your screen now. I think it has 3 questions. We have 8 responses. One more to go. Great. Thank you so much. I will just share the results. Okay, the results would be on your screen now.
Okay, so these questions are more qualitative. So I see that interesting. So a lot of you still feel that desktop website gives us a lot of traffic. Okay. I would like to hear why some of you mark desktop as the answer. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. I just wanted to understand from you guys, like, what is your thinking? I think that's pretty interesting to hear from you guys. Whosoever marked desktop as an answer, just want to hear your thoughts if anyone is willing to volunteer.
I have
just
marked,
felt Anurag. Yeah, go ahead.
so I have marked Android, but I think whoever has marked desktop, perhaps large scale like travel agents might use your platform. So there they might use, but I have marked Android because I think personal users.
Got it. Anyone from the desktop bucket wants to volunteer? Like, I want to hear from you. Nothing is right or wrong. We're just discussing, debating. So would like to hear why someone marked desktop.
Yeah, Anurag, like I marked desktop because first I thought about the booking agencies. They generally, when they book in cafes or something like that, they generally use desktops. The other reason was that flight is something which is like costly compared to other products, and people want to compare more, and so they generally go and look for more things on laptop and research more. So that
Got
were
it.
the 2 reasons.
Good thinking. Good thinking. I think I was expecting something like this. So good. So the right answer is Android app. I think what has happened in India for sure post 2014-15 is that a lot more people have mobile devices compared to desktops and laptops, right? So just the sheer number of devices, right? If you look at the number of internet users in India, people claim anything between like 5 million to 600 million users. You would expect most of them are coming from phones, right? Not a whole lot of these users actually have access to desktop and laptop. And the second thing that has happened is we now that we have launched ground transport, right? So we have trains, bus, cabs, right? So the average ticket size has also become smaller, right? So a typical flight would be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, right? But a typical train ticket or a bus ticket would only be 1,000 rupees, right? Which is why you would see that a lot of your traffic is actually coming from mobile devices. In fact, a fair few marked mobile website also, which is also like a good, interesting answer. So we get most of our traffic on mobile devices, which kind of reflects the internet ecosystem, and most of it comes on the Android app, because obviously we have the most dominant Android ecosystem is Android. So obviously we get most of our traffic on Android apps. but desktop also is not too far behind, right? And in terms of traffic, Android might still be much bigger than desktop, but in terms of transactions, desktop definitely has far better rates of conversion, right? So people are actually able to more seamlessly book things on desktop, right, than they are able to book on, let's say, a smaller device, right, phone device, which is why in terms of orders, desktop is still very sizable. But the right answer is Android. Okay, this is another interesting one, and I think I tricked all of you by putting this question. Who is the biggest investor in GoMT Group? What's the right answer? So most of you have marked Tiger Global. I would like to hear why you marked it. I think this is a good one. Because you read some news reports.
I have answered Naspers, but I think Tiger Global, they have been investing in many tech-based startups in the year 2020.
Got it. Good thinking, Sai. Pretty smart thinking. Good one. Actually, the reasoning is pretty solid, but unfortunately, the answer is wrong. Actually, the answer is kind of like, I'll disclose more. Anyone else? Who marked Naspers? I think Naspers is also a pretty interesting answer. Who marked Naspers? I want to hear from you. Anyone? Whosoever marked Naspers? Guys, am I already boring you so much that you guys have already gone to sleep? I thought I put together a good set of questions for you guys. Come on. Who marked Naspers? Someone volunteer and tell me why you marked Naspers. I think that's also a very legit answer. If someone is thinking Naspers is probably a good answer to think about. And there's obviously some solid reason behind it, but I would like to hear from you. Anyone who wants to volunteer.
I actually answered Naspers, but I looked at it at the Google. So
got it. Okay, cool. So let me quickly answer this. So Tiger Global, actually, if you look at our set of investors, initially the company that actually backed us was Tiger Global, right? And Tiger is like Sai already pointed out, it's a very sort of active investor in Indian internet ecosystem, right? They were the biggest investors behind Flipkart as well, in case you don't know, right? They were like the biggest backers behind Flipkart, right? So Sachin and Vinny had a lot of backing from Tiger Global, but at some point in time the relationship soured and they were moved out. So Tiger actually was the first backer for GoMT also way back when we started, right? So this is early 2000s, right? So they actually kind of bet on GoMT, but at some point of time they exited out of the company. They sold all their stake during the IPO and when other investors came on board. Naspers is again also a good answer because when MakeMyTrip acquired GoIbibo, right? So GoIbibo earlier was not part of MakeMyTrip. So MakeMyTrip actually bought GoIbibo and then we became GoMMT, right? Which is why today we call ourselves GoMMT, the MakeMyTrip group. And Naspers was the biggest investor in GoIbibo. And hence when the merger happened, Naspers had a fair bit of, Naspers obviously became one of the biggest investors in the GoMT group also, but recently they also sort of, they felt that they don't want to focus on travel as a vertical, and so they sold their stake to one of the other large investors that we have, right? And most of you said, in fact, the option that has gotten the least votes, Ctrip, is the right answer. So Ctrip is actually our biggest investor. Ctrip, they are a very big. They are like, if you think of Ctrip is like MakeMyTrip of China. In fact, we tell it the other way. We say MakeMyTrip is Ctrip of India, right? Because Ctrip is a very big company. It's a company with $20+ billion market cap, right? So it is as big as Flipkart in India, right? So it's a very big company. It has massive scale, obviously, because China is a far larger company, a far larger country than us, right? And obviously the purchasing power is also much higher. So Ctrip is actually our biggest investor. They bought out when Naspers sold their stake. Ctrip actually bought it because they are a strategic investor in MakeMyTrip, because they feel they are a travel company, and if they buy stakes in a travel company, obviously a lot of learnings, and because India is a growing market, so that can give them good sort of returns, right? Which is why they came in. Now, what does this tell you? This effectively tells you that effectively, if you look at our investor shareholding, right, we are actually a Chinese company. Right? Ctrip is a Chinese company and they own close to 50% of MakeMyTrip. So don't tell this to others, but theoretically, we are a Chinese company in some sense, right? In terms of investor holding, right? So that is what it is. And the final question was, is GoMT Group profitable? Yes, at least the last 2 quarters we have been profitable. Again, if you look at our earnings report, it will tell you a loss in terms of IFRS accounting statement, but that is simply because obviously you understand in an income statement there are a lot of non-cash stuff also, right? So you have depreciation and amortization, you have impairment of goodwill, you have share-based compensation, whatnot, right? So which is why in the official sort of earnings report, you will see us as non-profitable. But if you look at it at a adjusted operating, what we call as adjusted operating profit, you will find us profitable. So again, similar to how we talk about adjusted margin, we also talk about adjusted operating profit. And if you look at adjusted operating profit, I'll just quickly share my screen again and just show you this deck, master deck. So if you look at adjusted operating profit, so Q2 FY22, we were positive, right? So these are the numbers, right? So we made a profit of $6.6 million in Q2 FY22. Q3 FY22 is not here in this particular deck, but in Q3 FY22, again, we made an adjusted operating profit of, I think, 13 to 15 million dollars is what we made, right? So we have been profitable couple of these quarters, and we were profitable in FY21 when things were going good, before the second wave came in. But prior to that, if you look at it, consistently non-profitable. But again, like I said, that has simply to do with the fact that we want to grow very fast and we are investing in growth. We're spending a lot of money, resources, throwing a lot of discounts at the customer to basically grow as fast as possible. But if we want it to be profitable, like you can see, if we want to be profitable, any quarter we want to be profitable, we pull back our spends and we are able to get to operating profit ASAP. So it's not a big problem. In fact, MakeMyTrip, if I could just put it up, MakeMyTrip is one of the very few internet companies in India that is actually profitable. One of those very rare customer B2C companies, B2C internet companies that is actually profitable. Flipkart is still not profitable. Zomato is still not profitable, even though it has listed. Paytm is still not profitable. MakeMyTrip is one of those very few companies in India that is actually